Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young, licensed clinical social worker. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, thank you so much for joining me. This is episode 15, and today I'm joined by Michael Spencer of Let's Purify. This is a great episode where we talk about our stuff and our relationship to our stuff and how having stuff that we don't look at can really impact our energy. We also talk about the difference between seasonal storage versus stuff that's just been sitting around. And we also talk about Marie Kondo. She's got the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and she has the new Netflix show, Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. So some of the things that Michael and I talk about in this episode is the energy vibration that things have. To me, that's a little woo. And I'm pretty conservative. And so we ended up having this great conversation. And I don't think that I've ever really verbalized when things feel a little woo to me and that my inner teenager wants to roll her eyes and go like, are you kidding me? And we had this really honest conversation about it. And I love the way that Michael was able to hear what was going on for me and not shame me and allow me to have that room. And often I think that we share more of a similar experience, but the words that we use are just very different and it can be very off-putting. We had recorded an episode before the podcast even launched. I didn't produce it because the sound quality was so poor. And after we recorded this episode today, we talked about it. And really, it was a blessing that it didn't, because we had this amazing conversation that you're going to be hearing. And there's no way we would have had the depth of conversation that we had today that we did a couple months ago before I launched. So let me just tell you a little bit about Michael. Michael Spencer is the founder of Let's Purify, an online business dedicated to the purification and upliftment of the home energy of our living spaces, personal energy fields, and our planet. Michael has honed a process called home energy purification to help soulful people release attachments to accumulated belongings and experience greater freedom in all areas of life. With training as a mental health counselor, Reiki practitioner, and modern-day priestess, Michael brings a wide variety of expertise and a whole lot of heart to her services. You can connect with Michael on her website, letspurify.energy, and her podcast, the Let's Purify podcast. You can also sign up for Michael's email list on the homepage of her website. When you do, you'll receive her free giveaway, 15 clarity-boosting questions for decluttering and purifying. And on to the show. Hey, Michael.
Hello, Patricia.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be back.
I know. Hopefully this one will work out. And if not, we'll just have another conversation and we'll just keep doing it till we get it right.
Sounds good.
So, do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
I do.
And when did you know that you were a highly sensitive person?
You know, I think for me, it was more coming into adulthood and probably even more in my 30s of just becoming a little bit more sensitive to noises. Like my startle response is much more heightened. You know, being around crowds and at parties, I feel really drained afterwards. And I feel like I have to kind of prepare myself to be in spaces where there are a lot of people. And I don't necessarily remember that as a child. And I know that, you know, I had not always identified, once I learned about the HSP term, I didn't immediately identify that way because of it being a trait that you have from birth by some definitions. And I don't remember being super sensitive, you know, very young and into my teen years. It does feel like something that has, at least I've become more aware of in my adulthood.
Mm-hmm. I notice I'm becoming less tolerant and more sensitive to certain things as I age. And I don't know if it's just a factor of I've just kind of gotten at that point where I just don't have time to put up with stuff and I'm just telling the truth, or if our nervous systems actually do change a little bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Anybody out there want to do some more research? And if this is the first time that you're tuning into the show, if you haven't heard the term highly sensitive person, it's a term that was coined by Dr. Elaine Aron. If you go to her website, which is hsperson.com, there's a self-test that you can take. If you take it and you suspect you're highly sensitive and you don't fit the criteria, there's another test for children, and Dr. Aron suggests that you take that. Remember back to when you were a child and what people said about you and see if that resonates for you. So just if you're jumping in for the first time and you're going, what is this highly sensitive person stuff? What do you think of the term highly sensitive person?
I think it's a helpful term for people to have a way of identifying, if they're experiencing some of these things like what I mentioned or what other HSPs experience. It can feel kind of lonely or confusing to not know what's going on. And I think having that term can be a really helpful way for people to anchor in and to normalize the experiences.
Yeah, I think so many of us have heard we're too sensitive, too talkative, you can't take a joke, you think too much, you worry too much. So for me, finding out that there was a term and that it was genetic and it was how I was wired, because it's interesting, I just was listening to somebody the other day talking about that she felt that her sensitivity was a result of being raised with an alcoholic father and having to learn how to read the environment and to make sure that she didn't upset anybody. And this was on a podcast I was listening to, and that was kind of, although I didn't have an alcoholic in my family, was kind of the way that I told my story until I learned I was a highly sensitive person. And I think as we get more information about ourselves, we go back and we kind of rewrite that narrative, the story of our lives and why we were like we were based on new information that we get.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Is there another term that you wish were used instead of being called a highly sensitive person?
No, I don't have any negative association with that term. And so it fits for me. I don't feel like I need a different term.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, Michael, can you tell me, why is home energy purification interesting to you?
Well, it is something that I started playing around with on my own personally. I was decluttering my home, but what I realized, and this was several years ago as I started going through this process, and I wasn't calling it decluttering. I started spontaneously saying to people, my husband or friends, oh yeah, I'm doing this home energy purification process, which meant that I was using and I was kind of making this up as I went. I was using intuition to really tune into the vibrations and energies of the objects that I was sorting through, and using mindfulness to really be present with the experience of deciding what I was going to hold on to and what I was going to let go. And it just became something that it was happening so easily for me. And I realized that this is something that I could teach to other people as a method of sorting through their stuff much more efficiently than trying to kind of ping pong back and forth in our heads of, should I keep this? Shouldn't I keep it? I have to keep this. Don't I have an awful person if I want to let go of this? And, just really tuning in and trusting that intuitive part, and then bringing in energy tools to be able to help loosen up some of the stuck and stagnant energy that can gather in our attics and our basements and closets and corners where things haven't been moved in a long time. So it became very interesting to me how clutter and energy are, they sort of walk hand in hand.
Sure. And it's interesting. I think this is where you and I are a little yin and yang. And my hope is that we'll find a place to meet in the middle here, because I would say you're a little woo for me.
Right.
And I don't say that disrespectfully. I want to name it because I'm wondering if there are people who are listening who are going, what do you talk about the vibration of objects? It's just stuff.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if we can talk here's what I'm thinking. Let's talk about what that means, and that maybe what you and I can do is each use the language that we would tend to use, so that for the listeners that feel like they totally get what vibration and intuition is, and like it's not woo for them because this is totally the place where they live. And then for the people that are more like me that go like, vibration with stuff? That's a little woo. If we can
Right.
maybe marry the two.
Yeah, I'll do my best for sure.
Okay. Can I ask you a question? How is it? I mean, we've talked about this offline since we have a friendship. We've never met in person, but we've been friends for a number of months. How is it for you when I say that? Because I feel a little awkward just even naming it.
Well, I think it's important to name it. And I think for me, I'm pretty comfortable with myself these days, with my intuition, with the language that I use, with this aspect of my sensitivity, of being sensitive to objects and to spaces. And I recognize that not everyone does speak that language. And I think it's beautiful to be able to put language to it so that you can say, I don't really know what you're talking about. That feels a little woo. So that we can find that place to meet in the middle in our communication.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
You're going to tell us about what the vibration of an object means, or talking about vibration.
Yeah. And we'll look at a couple of things. So the human body has an energy field and it has a vibration. And one of the ways that we can tell how our vibration is, like kind of what frequency we're functioning at, is we can notice if we're in a really low vibration place, we are going to be more in tune with lower vibration emotions. So sadness and anger. And I'm not talking about, there isn't a negative judgment, first of all, about saying these are lower vibration. And we also, it's not like, oh, we should never feel a low vibration emotion. Like that's totally, we want to have the freedom to feel all of our emotions. They're all very important and they can be guideposts for, what's going on in our lives. And if anyone has experienced like a lingering depression, that can be a very low vibration place. It's a low energy place. It's a place where maybe our thinking patterns are gremlins, as you like to say, Patricia, and I can really relate to that term too. Our gremlins can really get activated when we're in a lower vibration place. And then physically, we might be in a lower vibration when we have a cold or the flu. And then if we look at our higher vibration states, we're going to have a much easier time connecting with our positive emotions, or, these emotions like joy and happiness and hopefulness, and, getting into our mental states that are maybe more positive, more, like I just said, more hopeful, just having this more even optimistic view of the world. Like, okay, things are possible. Everything isn't shutting down around me. And then physically, we may feel more vibrant, more alive, greater sense of maybe even excitement about what's coming for the day, what's happening in our lives. So does that make sense, just in terms of how our vibrations might be defined a little bit more from the human perspective?
It does. And what I'm kind of struggling to formulate in my head is, it seems too linear for me, because I don't think it's that linear, but I think that there's a challenge in trying to name it and then understand what it is. Because, and I don't think this is what you're saying, so I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm trying to figure out a way to language this, that I can't even do it. I can't even do it. Do you know where I'm heading?
I think I might. And I think that you're right. It's not just a spectrum of low to high. I mean, there's so much that happens energetically that we're not even aware of and that we can't put words to. And so we try to find ways to describe it and to kind of boil it down into a way that can start to make sense.
Yeah, because like what I'm thinking is, like, I know that there have been times when I get stuck by my stuff, and we'll talk about this more. And so I know that my vibration or my energy level is lower when it comes to being stuck about stuff, but we can still function and we still operate in the world. And so as I'm hearing you talk, I kind of divide things in my head and just thinking about the listeners that I don't want the message to be that like either we're happy or we're depressed. Our vibration is high or it's low, that we fluctuate, and that there's so many places in between that we go. And I think especially as highly sensitive people, if we get overwhelmed and overstimulated, often, and tell me if this is correct, Michael, maybe I'm making something up, that we need time to retreat. And at those times, our vibration may be lower, but it's due to overwhelm and needing to recharge. And so I'm just wanting to add a little bit more information around the words around a higher or a lower vibration.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And we are, yeah, so it's not like we can necessarily be defined as like, I'm a high vibration person, and therefore my vibration is at, whatever frequency at all times. Of course, being human, just like we go through a full range of emotions, we also have lots of fluctuations in our energy fields and in our vibrations that, and we're constantly interacting with the rest of our experience. So our vibration may feel one way at when we're at work at the office, and it may feel another way whenever we're homesick on the couch. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I always think that there's room for the and this is just what you're saying, that we can be having a high vibration over one thing and a lower vibration around something else. Like you've said, that it could be situational or it could be related to something specific, or we have that ability. If you're a therapist, we call it compartmentalizing. It's like sort of being able to put your stuff in a little cubby hole or a box. And so you pull it out and you deal with one thing, and then you pull something else out and you deal with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Did you want to talk a little bit more about what the vibration energy is, the vibration of objects?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything in the universe is made of energy. I mean, this is scientifically proven. And what happens is when energy is so dense that it appears to be solid, and it doesn't appear to us as humans, it doesn't look like it's energy. So we can kind of forget that everything is made of energy. And whenever our stuff, I'm trying to think of a way to describe this. So if we think about the stuff in a basement that has maybe accumulated over a long period of time, maybe even decades, and there's stuff that's just been sitting down there that no one in the home has been addressing. And so I want to make the distinction between something that's being stored for, say, seasonal use, like your skis or your Christmas decorations or other holiday decorations, that's one type of storage, as opposed to something that's been sitting and hasn't been touched for a really, really long time. There can be a stuck or stagnant energy that gathers around those objects. And then there can also be our own interaction with those objects. We may feel resistance to them. We may feel some really charged emotions about them, about not wanting to deal with them, trying to push them away, even denying that they're there. And all of that has, because our emotions and our thoughts also carry energetic charges. So those are things that also make up our vibration, and it's part of what is interacting with the energy fields of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to give you an opportunity, Patricia, if you have questions about that or need clarification, or if that makes sense. I just want to check in and see how that's landing.
It totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. So keep on going.
Yeah. So we can really shift the energy of our homes because, if the stuff in our homes have energy, so do our homes themselves. And when we start to address whatever it is, the clutter, the accumulated stuff in the basement, the pile of stuff in the corner of our office, when we start to bring some attention to that and I always encourage doing it in a really gentle way, in a mindful way. When we start to direct our attention, which is a way of directing our energy, and looking at the possibility of exploring what is in this pile, what is in this corner of the basement, we naturally start to shift the energy. And then we can also bring, for people that this resonates for, we can bring in energy tools like sound tools, because sound waves impact, they are energy and they impact the energy of spaces. And if you've ever held a drum or a rattle near you and you've sounded it, you can probably feel what that feels like in your belly or in your chest. That's because your vibration of your body is running into those the vibrations of the sound currents. And so you can actually feel what that feels like, which is a cool experience if you want to get a little woo about it. And
Yeah.
and it's one of those ways that when I work with people, it really helps to make this a little bit more concrete. Like, oh, I can feel, oh, that rattle. I hear that sound, but I also feel it in my body. Or if you're listening to loud music with a lot of bass, those are sound vibrations that you're feeling as well as hearing the vibrations as they're entering the ear canal. It's woo, and all of a sudden it becomes much more practical when we can feel that. So then we can activate our imaginations and go, well, if I can feel that and that's doing something inside me, what would it do if I took this rattle or this drum or this piece of music down into this space that's been kind of stagnant and stuck? Maybe I can just play with that and see what happens. Some people are really sensitive to the energy of crystals and like to put some crystals around in a space that has been feeling stuck or stagnant, or even, maybe it has a sad feeling to it, and we put some loving energy in the form of a crystal like rose quartz. There's so many different ways that we can get creative with this. And the bottom line is that we are tending to ourselves. Because anytime we have something stuck or stagnant in our homes that we're denying is really bothering us, or that we're trying to avoid or ignore, we are in essence ignoring or denying a part of ourselves. When we start to address this outer stuff, we can really tenderly and sweetly be addressing whatever's going on inside.
Mm-hmm. I have an inner teenager who's rolling her eyes right now.
Uh-huh. I love it.
And I'm struggling because I'm really right there with you. I go to yoga, they use sound, I breathe, it calms me, it works. I believe in good juju, I believe in good vibes. And it's interesting, I don't think I've ever really allowed myself to have a voice for this part of me that I think is very traditional and very conservative. And I just want to be I want to look at another teenager and roll my eyes and go like pointing with my hand over my mouth, can you believe what she's saying?
Whatever. Yep.
And I don't think that I've ever really allowed myself to give voice to that. And certainly not with somebody who's talking about it in the moment.
Right. I love it. Yeah. So what do you think that is?
My guess is off the top of my head is just being raised very conservatively. And it's interesting because I think in some ways I'm very open-minded and probably practice some of the things that you're doing, but I think I'm a little closeted. I have sage that's been in my cupboard for a couple of years. It's there to smudge, but I've never smudged. But the sage is there. So I think I'm a closeted woo with a little W.
I love it. I love that I get to witness this and that you're sharing it with the podcast audience. How beautiful to be letting yourself be seen a little bit more and to see yourself a little bit more. You're peeking into your own inner eye roller and what's going on there? Or, hey, it's very cool. And hey, there's this sage that's been sitting here for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm a closeted woo with the little W.
Patricia, I'm not
Yes.
surprised.
This honestly is the first time that I think I've really discussed this openly and with somebody who, like, you're, in my mind, I'd call you woo with a capital W.
Super woo.
Yeah. Okay. Woo factorial.
Yeah. And this is the thing. This is how I see it. Our beliefs are constantly evolving and changing. And do I get caught up in my beliefs sometimes and want to defend them? Absolutely. And I also have seen my own beliefs shift and change so much over time that it's like if somebody doesn't see it the way that I see it, like that's cool. And you might that person may see it the way that I see it in 2 months or in 2 decades. And I may not even see it the same way anymore by then. So, we're constantly trying to understand the world that we live in. I feel like there's got to be room for infinite perspectives on it because we're all trying to understand what the heck is going on.
Yeah. Well, I love that you've created a safe space for me on my own podcast to come out of my baby woo closet.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Safety first. And it's so fun, if there is a part of you or anybody who's listening that's like, I want to roll my eyes about putting crystals on a box that I don't want to deal with. But part of me thinks that maybe that could help. Like, why not try it? Why not have a little fun with it? Why not burn the sage and see what happens? You might burn the sage and start coughing and be like, this is terrible. Or you might burn the sage and go, I don't really feel anything. Or maybe you burn the sage and go, something feels a little different. Huh. Like, why not just experiment with it? You don't have to believe anything. You can just play and notice what your system, what your body, what your mind, what your emotions, your thoughts tell you. Like we're in this land of experimentation.
Absolutely. And what I think often happens is that we have similar beliefs, but the language that we use around it is different. And we often use the language as a way to create separation because, like, for me, I'll go like, woo, eye roll, instead of being open to what the message is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I know there are some ways that I can get rigid about my language. What I'm doing is purification. I don't use the word decluttering as much, although I still use it a lot on my podcast. And I recognize that people know what decluttering is. They don't know what purification is until I explain it. And then they get to decide, does that resonate with me or not? I don't know.
Right. And what I'd like to do is a little bit of a recap about the conversation that you and I had a few months ago that really never got out because it's pertinent to what we're talking about now. And I talked about this a little bit in the previous episode with Matthew Morgan, where we talked about what is an HSP, about HSPs and their stuff. What I've observed, and this is true for me, is when highly sensitive people as kids grow up in families where there's not a language of feelings and we're not seen and we're not heard, we're not taught how to self-regulate, there is no language for how we're feeling and how we manage. I think many of us develop relationships to things instead because we need something to get that energy out with. And it's one of the few things, at least for me, that I could control was my stuff. And so I have a lot of energy around my stuff. I don't like my husband is like, don't touch my stuff, don't move my stuff. And I struggle with clutter. I've always been the type of person I want to be prepared. So I don't do it so much now, but I was a person that always had tweezers and Band-Aids and aspirin and everything that anybody could ever need in my purse because I wanted to be prepared. I don't like running out of things. We've lived in our house for 20 years and I struggle with clutter, and we've got stuff that has been here because we've been here for over 20 years. And when you and I had the first conversation, I really was feeling resistant about, I don't like having this much stuff and it weighs me down, but the thought of having to deal with it or let go of it felt really, really challenging to me. And so,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I wanted to reconnect with that part of our conversation because then you were sharing with me how things have shifted. And I think that one of the really magical things about connecting with our relationship with our stuff is so that we can become more aware of it. Because what you're describing with how important things and objects can become to people because of how we're raised or because of our sensitivities, when we have the freedom and the space to start exploring that, something really magical can happen where we can start to become more discerning about that relationship. And maybe we can let go of some things and still choose actively to hold on to others.
Right.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I think for me that I thought that success was about accumulating things. I look at these shows where people have these walk-in closets, so I should have a shirt in every color and I could have shoes in every color. I'm not saying that I have that much stuff, but that really was my idea of success, was having enough. Because of how I was raised, everything was about value and getting a bargain. It really wasn't about, do you love this? Does this make you happy? It was just about stuff. And so I know right now it's really popular. Marie Kondo, she's got the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and I've heard about it. And now she's got a show called Tidying Up with Marie Kondo, or she says her name, Marie Kondo, on Netflix.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I started watching it, and it's been really transformational for me and having me think about things in a new way. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you is I'm not endorsing that we do it her way. And we're going to talk about why her way may not be so great for HSPs. There's a little bit of a modification that we need to make with that. But it really has gotten me thinking about what things do I have bring me joy, because her premise is she blesses the house and thanks the house when she gets there. As you go through the process of looking at your belongings, you hold each piece and you feel if it brings you joy, and if it doesn't and you choose to release it, you thank it and you pass it on. And I realize there are very, very few things in my home that bring me joy. It's stuff. A lot of it is just stuff.
Yeah. What an amazing realization to have through her process, through, her way of being with stuff. And interestingly, when we hold something and we're determining whether it sparks joy or not, part of that is tuning into the energy of the object, right, whether it's being spoken that way or not. Because how do we feel whether something is sparking joy or not? It's the interaction that we're having with that particular object. And I just want to come back to what you're saying about how it sounds like that has been pretty life-changing for you, to be able to notice what is just stuff that's been accumulated for reasons that maybe aren't in alignment with who you truly are, who you're becoming, and things that were accumulated for, because you're supposed to. Part of success means having a lot of stuff. Part of being savvy means getting a good deal. So if you can get something, buy one, get one free, you should get it whether you actually need it or not. When we accumulate according to old belief systems like family beliefs and cultural beliefs, we're sometimes accumulating over a long period of time without really tuning in to however you want to frame it. Do I love this? Does it spark joy? Is it even useful to me? I think it can be interesting to expand our questions a little bit beyond just joy. I know some folks that I've worked with, it's helpful for them to have a greater spectrum of questions, because does this, I'm trying to think of something mundane, does this TV spark joy? Like, not really. It's functional though, and it's pleasant to watch this particular, or my laptop. Does my laptop spark joy? Well, no, and it's super functional. Mm-hmm. So sometimes for folks that can be a little literal, maybe, and I don't say that in any type of negative way, because that can be me sometimes too. It can be nice to have a little bit more spectrum. And it sounds like for you, that question of does it spark joy was really opening and helped you to really realize, like, I'm carrying around a whole bunch of stuff here that may not actually be serving me.
Exactly. And my value of getting things for a bargain and a deal and more is better. And the concept of it's mine, I'm keeping it, I'm not letting it go. I can totally see how this ties into issues with food. I've talked, and we may do an episode about this in the future about, I'm thinking, do I really want to go here? Let me just say, from my experience as an overeater, for anorexics, often what goes on, and if I offend anybody and if I'm wrong, send me an email. I lived in a recovery home with people with eating disorders, and some of my best friends are therapists with, recovering from eating disorders. So I don't feel like I'm talking out of my ear. But oftentimes anorexics, their anorexia is about, I don't need anything. I don't have feelings. I'm self-sufficient. Bulimics are, I want it all. I'm too much. I got to get rid of it. And compulsive overeaters are, and this is true for me, it's mine. I'm keeping it and you can't have it back. And so I can see how that with my stuff that I haven't very often treated myself to things that I love because everything has to be a deal or a bargain. And the few things that I have that I love were a splurge. And, while I wouldn't use the word vibration when I think about them, but these couple of items that I've identified that now I'm using regularly, it's like I want to, the word that I use is happy dance. I want to do a happy dance. Like I love holding, two of them are mugs. I love putting my drink in my mug and using them every day. And these are mugs that have to be hand washed. They can't go in the dishwasher. They can't go in the microwave. So it takes a little bit more care to use them. And they make me happy. Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's so funny. Even before you said the word happy dance, I felt this smile spreading across my face because I could feel it. I knew man, she really loves whatever these things are. And it is amazing. And we can truly surround ourselves with so much more that brings us true joy. And it isn't necessarily like the things that bring me the most joy and the most just like light my eyes up, bring this giant smile to my face are not things that cost zillions of dollars, and they're not things that necessarily anyone else would say, oh yeah, that brings me joy. I love that. It's the things that I put a special meaning to, or that are connected to a meaningful experience for me that brings back that special feeling.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting for me that if I were to look at all of my items and how much money I spent on all of this stuff, I mean, obviously we can't play coulda, woulda, shoulda, and I'm not implying that, but given the knowledge that I have now, and if I could travel back in time with all the knowledge that I have now, I would accumulate 1/5 of what I have, and instead of spending my money on all of this stuff, I would have far less, and I would have splurged on the things that really brought me joy, but I wouldn't do that because it was all about getting a deal and getting as much as I could. So now I've got a house full of stuff that really doesn't bring me joy. And it just means going, isn't that interesting? And what do I want to do moving forward?
Right. And this is where the decluttering movement, or what I call it, purifying, this is where that choice point of like, okay, here I am. I've got this house full of stuff that doesn't really bring me joy, that doesn't really reflect my current values. What do I choose to do with that? And for folks who are in that position, who choose to enter a process of decluttering, minimizing, tidying up, purifying, it allows that if you do it in a way that incorporates a holistic approach, so that you are, I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. When I work with people with home energy purification, I really see it as an archaeological dig into one's history. And it's shedding and letting go of anything that doesn't reflect who the person really is, how they identify themselves, and who they're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean letting go of things that still have meaning, even though, I got this when I was a child. It simply means having the opportunity for that to be in its right context and in its right place in your life moving forward. so that you are surrounded by mostly things that you go, yeah, when I come home, I feel like I'm in the right place.
Right.
I feel like I'm in a place that makes sense to me.
And not having that sense of overwhelm or dread because there's just all this stuff that's around.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the little hacks that I think for HSPs, Marie Kondo, she'll go in and she'll have people take all the clothes out of their dresser, out of their closet, everything, and they make a big pile on the bed. Now, I know if I did that, I would put all my stuff out. I'd get overwhelmed. It would be time to go to bed, and I'd shuffle it onto the chair, onto the dresser, and then it would be moved into the other room. And probably for the next 6 months, we'd be stepping over pile of my clothes because I couldn't deal.
Right.
So for me, what I did is I chose to do one dresser at a time, one dresser drawer at a time. And I could do it, have success. She has a way of folding things. My drawers look amazing. If you are in the Unapologetically Sensitive Facebook group, which is a closed group, I will post pictures of my drawers because I'm very, very proud. I went through part of my closet. I'm just doing it in pieces. I've gone through some of the drawers in my nightstand. I went through some of the drawers in the bathroom. I had a huge pile of stuff on my dresser. I had this hanging rack with all my scarves and belts and all the clothes that, they're not dirty enough to put in the hamper, but they're not clean enough to put back in the closet.
Right.
I cleared it all away, and I just was amazed at how it's, how open that space feels, not having all of that stuff there. And I tend to get overwhelmed at night and I'm tired and I don't want to wash my face and I don't want to put my stuff away. But since I've started doing this, take the time to make sure if it's dirty, I put it away. If it needs to be folded, I fold it up and I put it away. Like, I'm really enjoying that sense of freedom that I'm having in part of my house. There's still a lot more to do. And I'll trust that I'll do it. But I feel like it's broken that path of like, I can't stand the clutter. I don't want to get rid of my stuff. I don't know what to do, to I really like this feeling and I love folding my laundry and putting it back in the drawers where it's neat. And at night, I love if something needs to be folded back up, I fold it back up. I'm enjoying that discipline of the process, which is also esteeming and makes me want to do it more.
Right. It feeds on itself in a really good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question to you is for people that are stuck. And when you and I had done our first interview a couple months ago, I was stuck. And it was a little bit of a hard interview for me to do because, we're talking about this great way of releasing stuff. And I'm like, it's my stuff and you're not touching it.
Right.
How do we help people if they're in that place that they want to start letting go and finding more joy, but are feeling like, don't be touching my stuff?
Right. Well, I think it's a couple of things. I want to address the don't be touching my stuff part as well as the methods that we use. So, the don't be touching my stuff part, I think there's always the opportunity to tune in with what is that voice? Who is that saying don't touch my stuff? And is it okay if we start with some place that isn't as charged and it feels a little bit safer? So maybe we start with the silverware drawer in the kitchen, that if that's a place that feels a little less, or like a drawer that gets constantly cluttery in my house is where we have our like aluminum foil and plastic wraps and plastic bags. And I'm trying to use less plastic anyway, so I probably have energy about that too. But starting with a place that doesn't have as much energy, like maybe a linen closet, like, okay, can I just take these towels and notice which ones I use all the time, which ones are kind of ratty and maybe it can be turned into something else, and organizing a little bit at a time in a place that feels safe. So not going into a place, if it's a clothing collection that feels really tender, like I don't want any of this to be taken away, and we feel that grasping, that we don't have to start there. And that we can also notice what would help to bring a sense of comfort, what would help to bring a sense of safety to the process. If we go, I'm feeling this resistance, I don't want anybody telling me I have to let go of my stuff. And at the same time, when we have that inner nudge that we know that it's time, that's when we need to start doing it, not when somebody else says, Marie Kondo says this or Michael Spencer says that. No, it's whenever we know I'm feeling resistance to this, but I'm ready. And then when we're in that space of readiness, truthfully, not because we're trying to follow some other system, then doing some things, whether it's putting on some calming music or even basic things. If we decide, all right, I'm going to go through, like you said, some of my dresser drawers, doing that when you're well rested. So not starting it at 10 o'clock at night, doing it when you're well fed, so you're not super hungry and irritable, making sure that you're hydrated, doing other things that kind of make sure that you're already in an even state so that you can think clearly.
I like that.
Yeah. And then having some type of system to bounce off of can be really helpful. And I think when we look at Marie Kondo's method, it's making sure that that's a fit for you if you're going to use it. For some people, tearing through, like getting all the books in the house in one place and sorting through them, or putting all the clothes on the bed, that is going to hit home like nobody's business. And for other people, that is going to, like you were describing, Patricia, bring up so much resistance, overwhelm, and just be shocking to the system that it's not going to be effective.
Right.
So I think anytime we're looking at doing anything, whether it's decluttering or anything else, we need to make sure that just because millions of people are having success with this system doesn't necessarily mean that it's a fit for you.
Right. I love that you said that, because I've decided that there's no way that I can, everything is going to have to be piecemeal by piecemeal, because that's just what works for me.
Yeah.
This is probably going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, so we can, I don't know what we can do. One of the things that I feel like if I were going to do this perfectly, I would be itemizing things as I sort. I'd be taking pictures for taxes. I'd be doing all of this sorting as I'm getting rid of. But like, that is just too much. It's just enough to go through and figure out what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to get rid of. And then I think for me, what I'm going to end up doing is, we have a friend that takes things down to Mexico, and I think that's the easiest thing to do. But I think that's another highly sensitive person thing, that we want to be organized and we want to be meticulous, and, or then the boxes sit around for forever because we don't take the next step of taking them to Goodwill or doing a garage sale or donating them. So is there anything that you can say that might help people if they find themselves, like me, getting a little stuck in that part of the process?
Well, I think working with someone who, whether you team up with, depending on the quality of relationship that a person has with their spouse or partner or roommate, sometimes you can kind of play off each other really well. And even having, a friend or an accountability buddy who can help keep the process going, and maybe you help them keep their process going. I know lots of people who have done, minimizing or decluttering together. And I think that can be really helpful to feel like you're not in it alone, because as you know, when you're looking at a home that is full of 2 decades of stuff, it's a big deal to start deciding to chip away at that, or to even go into a full process. Like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm getting rid of everything that doesn't spark joy or doesn't resonate with me. And so having someone, and even if it's someone like me who kind of coaches people and supports them in their process, because that last piece in particular of doing all of that sweet soul-searching work to decide what stays and what goes, and then to get it boxed up and to put that stuff, I almost cursed on your podcast, Patricia, to put that stuff in your garage or by your front door, and to not let it go, it is energetically, it's a huge block. So to get that stuff out the door, to complete the process, is huge. And that's one of the things that I really support people with. And I know there are some, so I work with people online virtually. So we meet via video conference. I know there are other decluttering experts who and organizers who will come into the home, and they'll go through supporting the person. And then at the end of the day, they will take the stuff and donate it. Mm-hmm. So like, you're done at the end of the day. And I prefer to be able to work with people virtually. Then I'm able to serve people all over the world. And it's just much more efficient than me driving from my house in Newville, Pennsylvania to wherever somebody is. And I think it's really important for people to take that last step, to break that energetic connection, to get that old stuff out of the house. And it can be one of the most challenging parts.
Yeah. And for those of you that have not had online support and you feel like it's just not the same as having someone there in person, but you're thinking about this, I would really encourage you to give it a try. I'm involved with so many online groups right now, and I know I've talked about the app Marco Polo. I don't get anything from them. I'll tell you, at some point I am going to pitch them and see if I can't get them to sponsor the podcast. But even using an app like Marco Polo with someone can be so powerful. And even as I did all my drawers, I was taking pictures and sending them to my best friend to show her what my progress was. And, you know, even though no one was here in the house with me when I did it, my husband offered to keep me company. And for some reason, I really was in a place where I just was enjoying the process of doing it on my own, which is unusual. I usually am the type of person that I love company. I love companionship. I want someone to be with me. And for some reason, for this, I was able to do it with myself. But if you're entertaining the idea of working with someone online and you haven't done it, give it a try because it's pretty powerful.
I absolutely agree with that. And in my time of working with people online and also, you know, starting a podcast and being in a lot of Facebook groups where I get a lot of support from people and offer support, it's pretty amazing the deep connections that can be forged. I don't know that I would have believed it myself coming from the background of being a mental health counselor who worked with people in person. And I really value the transformation that can happen when we're in each other's spaces. And the more that I learn about energy and the more that I practice as an energy practitioner, we really do operate outside of time and space a little bit. And there's my super woo coming in. But energy, and that's what we're made of, and that's what the whole universe is made of, isn't bound by time and space. We don't need to get into a big metaphysical discussion. And I know for me, like I can really feel my connections with the people that I work with and friends. And Patricia, earlier when you said, been friends, first of all, you said for a couple of months or several months. I'm like, haven't we known each other for years? And then you said like, we haven't met face to face. I'm like, haven't we? Oh, right. I haven't been to California recently and you haven't been to Pennsylvania. It is interesting how those bonds can be forged without laying eyes on one another.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking the other day about all of the guests that I've had on the podcast. And two of the guests I met at Podcast Movement, I think 2 years ago. And other than that, Annie Schuessler, I did meet at a retreat. I'd been on her podcast and actually met her at a retreat in Santa Cruz in June. But other than that, all of the guests that I've had, I feel like I have close relationships with, but I haven't met them in person because of this online experience. And it really is kind of amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, rabbit hole.
I love it.
I do. Okay, I want to ask you a couple quick questions and pull us back to being an HSP. Is there anything you want to say before we move on?
No, let's go there.
I know, I wish we had more time. Let's have a 3-hour podcast. About the 45-minute mark is where things start to really loosen up, I've noticed. Michael, what are some of the challenges that you experience as an HSP?
Well, like I said, my startle response has become much more pronounced where, sometimes it's like my husband sneezes or one of the cats will jump up on the couch and I'm like, ah! And so, I have to do some breathing to kind of bring myself back down. And I work from home as an online entrepreneur and I am really, really comfortable in my home. And so when I've started going out in public, it's like, it can feel very jarring. Just, being around other people. And that's something I kind of have to keep myself in practice of just going out and making sure I'm getting out of the house and whatnot. And I think being in crowds and where there's a lot of energy and even a lot of personalities, and then you put that together with a lot of noise, that's challenging for me.
Yeah. How about overwhelm?
Oh, absolutely. That I can definitely get to a state. And I would have to say in the past 6 months or so, I've been building some skills around that where it's becoming easier for me to manage my state emotionally, energetically, and it takes work.
Yeah. I definitely think that there are workarounds that we can do to
Mm-hmm.
function optimally in the world. Like, I'm not talking about you have a job where you work 80 hours a week and we're going to make that work for you as an HSP.
Right.
But I definitely think that there are ways that we can change how we think about things, how we approach things so that we can keep our energy levels more sustained. We're able to go out and function more in the world and then be able to come back and get the time that we need to replenish.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do for play?
Oh, I remember this question from last time, Patricia. I think I laughed and laughed.
You did.
I I'm not the best at playing. I like playing games. My husband and I sometimes play cards, and I like it whenever, my family will sometimes have a game night. Yeah, the things that I enjoy, I don't know, are particularly playful. Like, I love being in deep conversation with my friends at a coffee shop or on the phone. I love reading. Like, is that play? I don't know. Even vacationing, like, is something that when I'm on vacation, I have to really practice at, like, oh, wait, how do you relax? Yeah, so that can be challenging for me.
Yeah, I find vacations a little stressful. I really love being in my routine and having the things that I do, and it's a little stressful for me to go on vacation.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I hear you. What are some of your superpowers being an HSP?
Well, I think my sensitivity to spaces has really grown my ability to do the purification work for myself and then also to coach other people in it. It's to help people to make these connections via our sensitivity between our emotions and the stuff that we're holding on to and our energy fields, and helping people to be able to shift those things with a lot of grace and ease and even a lot of joy and play. I do get playful in my work. That's funny. So yeah, it feels like a superpower, and it's a real gift that as even though it can sometimes feel a little bit heavy if I don't manage it properly, I am pretty tuned in to people and have that deep empathetic connection with people, which, as long as I use that properly, I think it's a big strength.
May I tell you what I see one of your superpowers as?
Sure, thanks.
You have amazing empathy, and you've been such a wonderful support that part of the way that we connected. And Timothy Weinecke talked about this in the episode that he was on about the podcasters support group that I started on Facebook, which is a very small, intimate group where we all were launching podcasts around the same time. And you have just been so supportive, but your energy is just always so warm and pure. And like, it's just kind of yummy being in your presence.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that feedback. And I do, I make an effort to show up in places, where I'm in groups and things, and it also comes really easily. So thanks for pointing that out as a strength.
You're welcome. Tell us about the projects you're working on.
Well, I have the Let's Purify podcast, and that I just recorded episode 20 today. So it's still on the newer side. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm doing some revamping of my 3-month program right now. So that is going to be kind of relaunched here in the next several weeks. So I'm really excited about that, just kind of leveling all of that up so that I can help people in an even more delicious way.
And where can people find you?
My website is letspurify.energy, and people are welcome to email me at michael@letspurify.energy if there's any comments or wanting to get in touch.
That sounds great. And then you have a jingle for your podcast. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert it here in just a minute, because you and I were friends as you were working on getting the jingle done for your podcast. And it's really catchy. I learned this term. It's called earworm, from a very sophisticated show called SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
An earworm is when you get a song stuck in your head. So I'm going to play it, and my hope is that everybody gets the Let's Purify jingle earworm.
It's funny. I've had so many people tell me, like, oh, I've just been singing that song and been singing that jingle, and it makes me want to just get into those places in my house that need to be purified and decluttered. And it tickles me because at first I wasn't sure it was quite right for me. I didn't know if it was the right vibration. I just wasn't sure. And now I absolutely love it.
I remember that you told me what you were looking for, and then you had us listen to it. And it is really a catchy tune.
Yeah, he did a great job with it. And it's almost one of those things that when I first received it, I'm like, this is totally wrong. And then I've kind of mellowed with it and danced with it because I listen to it every time I produce an episode. I sing it all the time.
So I think I'm going to play you out with your jingle.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today with me, Michael. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, Patricia. I'm really glad to be here and glad for our professional relationship and our friendship.
Me too. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let intuition rise. Let's purify.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. If you want to get any information about the show, the easiest thing to do is to go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. You can find the episode you're interested in and click on it, and the show notes will be there. If you want to get in touch with me, my email address is there as well. We have a Facebook community by the same name, Unapologetically Sensitive. I would love to have you join. It's a place where I'm hoping that we can connect. I can get to know you and get a sense of what content you're looking for, how I can help you and be of service. Please remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.